English, but it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So it seems that the recording is in progress. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming here today. And I'm very glad to welcome today Professor Anna Brożek from University of Warsaw in our lectures of Analytic philosophy in Visegrad countries that was supported by Visegrad Fund. And in today's lectures, Anna will introduce her research. As I see the audience, probably all of you already know Anna because she is the head of the research center of Warsaw School, and she is one of the best researcher focusing on Warsaw School these days. She published several books and also edited several other books and special numbers of issues concerning the Warsaw School, but she also proceeded her research focusing on theory of questions, all analysis. And it seems to me that her today's talk will be merged of history of Polish philosophy, but also her own work. So without other ado, please, Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Zuzanna, Tadeusz, and Milosz for invitation, for organizing this series of lectures. And for today, I choose the subject which somehow is connected to the idea of analytic philosophy in Visegrad countries because for one reason it is based in history of analytic philosophy in these countries, and secondly it presents some of my research work which is partially historical and partially analytical. The title of my presentation is Analysis, Reconstruction, Engineering, dealing with concepts in the tradition of the Lvov-Warsaw School. Why this title? Well, of course, the concept of conceptual engineering, this idea of conceptual engineering is something very actual, very new, quite present in contemporary debates. But I am sure that conceptual engineering in some form was already practiced in the Lvov-Warsaw School, also in the very beginning. For instance, Jan Łukasiewicz in 1906 wrote his famous paper, Analiza I konstrukcja pojęcia przyczyny. Well, now it is famous. For many years it was forgotten, unfortunately, because Łukasiewicz, after switching to formal logic, did not like his early works, so his students rather for sure didn't know this paper, but it was recently translated into English, and now I see that it provokes more and more interest. And in fact, the ideas of Łukasiewicz and other members of the Warsaw School were quite similar to what the proponents of conceptual engineering, but also other popular methodological investigations, they are simply very similar. So that's why I entitled my lecture in such a way. I will start from some autobiographical remarks. So I'm becoming an old philosopher who starts from some memories. So that's what, for instance, Stanisław Leśniewski did with all his works. Yes, he started with this autobiographical remarks. And I also decided to do that in order to show you how this proceedings with concepts, dealing with concepts was present somehow in my life from the very beginning of my philosophical life, from 2005. In this year, I took part in a conference organized because of the 10th anniversary of the death of Józef Maria Bocheński, and during this conference, together with my supervisor, Professor Jacek Jadacki, we delivered a paper, Analiza Analizy. In Polish, in English, it is Analysis of Analysis. And we wrote this paper, which I find now quite basic, but I still agree with many statements in that paper. Well, we wrote it because we found in Bocheński's works a statement that there is no analysis of analysis. So we tried to provide one. Of course, Bocheński was not quite correct, because there are some analysis of analysis, but perhaps not so good as Bocheński would like to have them. So it was my, I think, first theoretical approach of what is analysis, and in particular analysis of concepts. At the same time, I confronted with many practical questions connected with analysis and reconstruction of concepts, because I prepared at that time my doctoral dissertation, which was entitled Logiczna analiza terminologii muzycznej i English Logical Analysis of Musical Terminology. And in the title, there is analysis, but in fact, what I did was reconstruction of these concepts, because, you know, in philosophy, we have great conceptual chaos in many different areas, but in theory of music, the chaos is much greater. So in order to reconstruct the conceptual scheme of music theory, I had to make a lot of order, introduce a lot of order there, and in fact, I reconstructed these concepts. And in the result of my dissertation, I provided a reconstruction of several hundred of concepts from the field of music theory. And of course, I also presented an outline of logically correct musical terminology and some philosophical basis of this reconstruction. And this book is available. My dissertation was then published as a book and is available under the title Principia Musica. It's in Polish, but it has this Latin title, which was my brother's idea, in fact, because he used to say that, you know, there was Principia Mathematica written by Russell, Principia Ethica by Moore, and now we've got Principia Musica written by Anna Brożek. That's, of course, an anecdote, but in fact, I tried to provide something like provide semiotic, logical foundations for music theory. So that was my practical, connection to analysis of concepts first, because not only one. And then several years later, together with my few colleagues, younger colleagues, Marcin Będkowski, Alicja Chybińska, Stepan Iwanek, and Dominik Trzaczykowski, together we realized a project financed by National Science Center in Poland, and it was connected with analytical procedures, with methodology of philosophy as it is practiced in the Lvov-Warsaw School. Yeah, so now I concentrated on this historical elements. I tried to find out what was this methodological core, which was so often emphasized as something essential to the Lvov-Warsaw School, the Polish branch of analytical philosophy. Our main work, published after this project was ended, is available in 2 languages: Antyirracjonalizm in Polish, Metody filozoficzne w Szkole Lwowsko-Warszawskiej, and in English, Anti-Rationalism, Philosophical Methods in the Lvov-Warsaw School. And one of our main theses there was that there are 3 special particular procedures, methodological procedures that were developed by the members of the Lvov-Warsaw School and applied in philosophical investigations, namely reconstruction of concepts, paraphrase of statements, and axiomatization of theories. And then I focused particularly on this first method, reconstruction of concepts, because I'm simply from the very beginning interested in this area, and I tried to find out what are peculiarities of the analysis of concepts as it was practiced in the Lvov-Warsaw School. And that was finalized by this book entitled Analiza i konstrukcja, o metodach badania pojęć Szkoły Lwowsko-Warszawskiej, Analysis and Construction, on the methods of examining concepts in the Lvov-Warsaw School. I recently contracted an English version of this book with Synthese Library. I hope that this book will be published perhaps this year, we will see. And in this book, I tried to reconstruct what analysis and reconstruction of concepts consists in, by taking into account 2 kinds of sources. so-called explicit methodology and implicit methodology. I follow here the distinction introduced by Kotarbiński into explicit aesthetics and implicit aesthetics. Implicit methodology is something what, for instance, philosophers or anyone who is a scientist, who is a scholar, implicit methodology is what scholars do, okay? And explicit methodology is what they write about what they are doing. So I tried to cover both. I looked at what members of the Warsaw School write about analysis of concepts and dealing with concepts in another way. And I also looked at their analysis, various analysis of concepts, concepts taken from various disciplines and provided in different stages of the development of the Warsaw School. And I looked at some common strategies. I looked for some common steps and tried to reconstruct what this procedure consisted in, whether there is some one procedure that all of them generally tried to follow when they analyzed concept, okay? And last autobiographical remark, in 2020, during the COVID, I took part in a session organized by Joseph Ulatowski, and it was devoted to the concept of truth. When I presented this, the first idea of how reconstruction of concepts looked like in the Warsaw School, and I tried to show, to indicate that what Tarski did with the concept of truth was somehow inspired by the way concepts were analyzed in the Warsaw School from the beginning. And I was very surprised that so many people replied to my talk very positively, indicating to me that these problems are so intensively analyzed everywhere, that it is so similar to conceptual engineering, to the work on rational reconstruction, okay, to the work on explication, which is also developed. And they were simply so much surprised that there were so many approaches so early in the Warsaw School, which concerned the analysis of concept, that it was an important inspiration for me to follow this path and to reconstruct what reconstruction of concepts consists in the Warsaw School. Okay, and now the plan of my talk, it will have 5 elements. I start with some historical remarks, and I will focus on an analytic tradition of the Warsaw School. I know that for all of you that are here with me today, these facts are obvious and simple, but I think that some new listeners, participants could follow the lecture online, and perhaps it would be good to have this sketch of what is the Warsaw School and its methodological characteristics. Then I will present full hallmarks of the reconstruction of concepts in the Warsaw School. So this is the result of my studies of the Warsaw School's methods of analysis and reconstruction of concepts. I tried to indicate what are these hallmarks, these peculiarities, and I indicated some of them here. Then I will move to some examples also taken from my book, but very shortly I will present some results of my reconstruction of concepts. Then I will present stages of analysis and the kind of algorithm that may be used by anyone who would like to follow the way analysis of concepts, reconstruction of concepts was practiced in the Warsaw School. And I will end with some general closing remarks. So let's start from historical remarks. So let me remind you that philosophy and logic was practiced in Poland from the very beginning of university, Jagiellonian University. From the end of the 18th century, the tendencies towards scientific philosophy became stronger and stronger. But because Poland was not present at the map of Europe in the 19th century, this development of scientific philosophy was stopped. But fortunately, there was a Pole who came from Vienna after obtaining habilitation there. He came from Vienna to Lvov. At Lvov, there was a possibility to conduct research and to teach in Polish, and Kazimierz Twardowski decided to establish a school of Polish philosophy there. He was one of the closest students of Franz Brentano, and he took lots from his teacher, from his master. Brentano had this great idea of scientific philosophy, but for Brentano, the basic philosophical discipline was descriptive psychology. So descriptive psychology is not psychology as we understand it today. It was a kind of description of mind, so a kind of theory of mind, but based on introspection. Okay, so for Brentano, but also for Twardowski, introspection was an accepted source of empirical data, just like extrospection. Both of the sources were accepted, and what we do with this data was, of course, analysis, description, reasoning, and so on. And by these procedures, we may construct various theories of both outside world and our inner world. Really, Twardowski wanted to establish something similar to what he knew from Brentano's school here in Poland, in Lvov at first. He even wrote in his autobiography that he had a vocation to make his fellow countrymen acquainted with the way of philosophizing I learned from Franz Brentano, especially to introduce university students with the spirit and method of his philosophy. As you see, this method was emphasized by him. The history of the Lvov-Warsaw School began in 1895 in Lvov, where Twardowski got the chair of philosophy. He had unusual, fantastic didactic skills and founded a strong school of scientific philosophy thanks to that. He was a professor of philosophy from 1895 to 1930. And at first, his school functioned only in Lvov, but after Poland regained independence in 1918, Warsaw became the second branch of the school. Twardowski students took new chairs of philosophy, logic, and psychology. In Warsaw, famous school of mathematical logic was established by Łukasiewicz and Leśniewski, who were, of course, Twardowski's students. Then new, smaller branches appeared of the school appeared also in Poznań, Wilno, and Krakow. And after the Second World War, also in Wrocław, Toruń, and abroad in Ireland, in the USA, Austria, and Switzerland. The Lvov-Warsaw School is a great group of people. Also, in case of the number of people that belong to the school. Presently, we count nearly 300 representatives of the school only in two first generations, and these school members you may find in Encyclopedia of the Lvov-Warsaw School, which is already available online with biographies of these nearly 300 representatives. Who belong to the school? Well, usually Twardowski, his students, and student of his students. So these two generations of students are included into the school. But is it enough to be a student of Twardowski to be a member of the school? Well, there are various reasons for calling a given group a school. Usually the reasons is that all philosophers in such a group share some ideas, some worldviews. There are also usually some other factors such as place and time and intellectual roots. And in the Lvov-Warsaw School, there were common places, Lvov and Warsaw and other smaller centers. But there were no common theoretical material views, okay, substantial views shared by all members of the school. There were only methodological bonds and some typical problems which were analyzed by them. And what does it mean that it was methodological bounds? It consists in preserving the postulate of clarity of speech and appropriate justification of judgments, application of logical tools, broadly understood, because Twardowski used general logic, let's say philosophical logic, general concepts of reasoning and so on. But his students, starting from Jan Łukasiewicz, introduced mathematical logic into the school, and from Łukasiewicz time, they started to use also formal tools in their investigations. But no set of views was common to all of them. There were, for instance, important differences in case of what are concepts, and it is important from the point of view of analysis of concepts, because if we have different views about what concepts are, we analyze different things, okay, different objects. There were also such philosophers that don't believe in concepts at all among these members of this group. So the group was very differentiated from the point of view of political views, views in metaphysics and so on. There were nominalists, realists, priests and atheists, absolutists and relativists in the school. And the methodological attitude of the Lvov-Warsaw School is sometimes summed up in the term anti-irrationalism. It was invented, the term was invented by Kazimierz Ajdukiewicz in 1934, when he presented Polish group of philosophers in front of the members of the Vienna Circle. He wanted to distinguish Polish group from what the Viennese did, because there were very, very important differences between these two approaches to philosophy. Members of the Lvov-Warsaw School believed that there are senseful philosophical problems and that we can solve these problems, or at least analyze them, and they tried to solve these problems with the use of new methods, old and new methods. Yeah, so as we may see, this methodological characteristics of the school is quite general. In practice, members of the school differ greatly also in methodological matters. For example, regarding the way logical tools were treated. For instance, Łukasiewicz, Leśniewski, to some degree Kotarbiński, were enthusiasts of formal methods, while Twardowski, the founder of the school, wrote an essay entitled Symbolomania and Pragmatophobia. Okay, so he wrote an essay indicating that those people who use formal methods use it too much a little bit, because they forget what philosophy is behind it, okay? All the time he focused on philosophical problems, and he was convinced that formal methods are not so much important in philosophical investigation. By formal methods, you may solve formal problems, but not philosophical problems, okay? So also because of that, logicians from the formal logicians, mathematical logicians from the Lvov-Warsaw School were quite careful about the interpretation of their results, because they were simply afraid of being accused of symbolomania or pragmatophobia. And what about dealing with concepts in the Lvov-Warsaw School? Well, it is easy to establish that dealing with concepts played a key role in research practice in the Lvov-Warsaw School. For instance, Ajdukiewicz wrote, Twardowski school directed its main efforts on conceptual analysis by stressing the importance of clear thinking. Okay, so analysis of concepts was something that led philosophers from the school to this clarity of concepts, clarity of thinking, clarity of speech was something central in the school. When we want to establish clarity language, we have to analyze concepts, we have to make distinctions, we have to introduce the definitions. Almost 20 years later, another member of the school, another student of Twardowski, Tadeusz wrote, the analysis of concepts is characteristic for a philosophical trend called analytical philosophy. represented in Poland by Kazimierz Twardowski, among others. And when we look at the practice of making philosophy in the Lvov-Warsaw School, we see that analysis of concepts were very commonly undertaken in the school, both as subject of dissertations and as part of greater wholes. The present book, my book, I mean, focuses on how concepts were analyzed and reconstructed in the school. For instance, among 45 doctoral dissertations prepared under Twardowski's supervision, 17 involved various types of conceptual analysis. And these proportions were very similar to in the second generation of the school. What are examples of that? For instance, Twardowski doctorate was analysis of concept, Witwicki's dissertation of the concept of ambition, Twardowski's lecture on the essence of concepts, Borowski's analysis of the concept of a whole, Łukasiewicz's dissertation of the concept of cause, but we may list many other examples. What is important is that the Lvov-Warsaw School was really a school, so the relation between teacher and students was very important, and the process of teaching was very important. So the process of analyzing concept, the process of finding some solutions, the process of providing an argumentation was simply taught by a teacher to student. Okay, they also analyzed some problems, some concepts together. So there was a kind of procedure that was used by all of them and somehow transmitted from generation to another generation. Even if they do not write so much about this matter, it was simply a part of a research practice. Okay. Yeah, and now let's go to the second part of my talk, 4 hallmarks of the reconstruction of concepts in the Lvov-Warsaw School. So when I looked through these many examples of how concepts were dealt with in the Lvov-Warsaw School, I established that there were at least 4 such important hallmarks, peculiarities of this method of dealing with concepts. And these are, firstly, the analysis of concepts in the Lvov-Warsaw School is reconstructive by nature. It is always combined with constructive, creative elements. It is a kind of engineering, if we want to use this recently popular term. Secondly, an important stage of analytical procedures in the Lvov-Warsaw School is categorical investigations, namely determination the category of objects and expressions involved. Third, the empirical basis or corpus of the analysis of concepts in the Warsaw School is verbal, when one reaches the concepts by studying language, or it is real, when one reaches the concepts by studying objects. Usually, this analysis, which I reconstructed, it includes both verbal and real corpus in various proportions. And finally, the analytic procedures applied by the members of the school are independent from what concepts are. Shortly speaking, methodology is independent from metaphysics. It is metaphysically neutral. Now I will focus on these various hallmarks separately, but I will start from the last because I think that the problem of what concepts are, the problem of metaphysical nature are very often something which causes vivid discussions among philosophers, and simply sometimes philosophers do not believe that they may agree on the methods applied if they even they do not agree on what they analyze. Okay, but I believe it is possible that we may differ with respect to metaphysics and still use the same methods. Why I think it is so? Well, let's start from this scheme, and let's, for instance, imagine a certain clock. Let it be the representative clock, namely Big Ben in London. And let's agree that this clock is something that is exemplified by, for instance, such properties as being device and being used to measure times. This clock is designated by the term clock. We may say that the term clock has some designates, okay, some real references like real clocks, but also it connotes something. For instance, it may connote these properties being device and being used to measure time. Now, we may also, if we are ontologically involved, we may also indicate some more, let's say, suspicious beings here. Like we may say that there are some things like clocks in general, and we may say that such term as clock also refers to clocks in general, which possess only these two properties, being device and used to measure time, but not any spatio-temporal, let's say, characteristics. And of course, we also have people who, for instance, see the clocks, who use the terms like clock in the ordinary language. There are perhaps some also theories of clocks used by people who construct clocks and so on, or repair clocks and so on. Of course, people can also present themselves such objects like real clocks, like terms clock, like clock in general. So we have a really rich picture of where we can look for the concept of clock. So the concept of a clock may be identified with various entities, for instance, mental representations, or its contents, or sets of properties, abstract or ideal objects. But of course, we may also deny that there is something like concepts, because these entities are quite suspicious. So let's look at it from another perspective. We have individual objects, for instance, Big Ben, sets of individual objects, for instance, set of all and only mechanical clocks, properties that determine the set two, for instance, being mechanical device and being used to measure time. We have some objects that are abstract or ideal substrates of properties mentioned in 3. We have language expressions, for instance, mechanical clock, designates of expressions 5, for instance, Big Ben, denotations of expressions 5, for instance, set of all and only mechanical clocks, and connotations of these expressions. And now let's look that we may, in making some agreements here, we may identify sets of individual objects with a denotation of expression and properties determining set of clocks with connotation of expressions. And of course, we have individual objects such as Big Ben that are designates of our expression. And these are some different objects that are, however, somehow connected with each other. Okay. And of course, we may also think about all these entities. We may think of individual objects, think of set of them, think of properties of them, think or create abstract entities. We may use expressions, but we may also imagine some expressions, and so on and so on. So there is really a big area of what we can choose as what concepts are and what we really analyze. But what I would like to emphasize is that there is some minimal something minimal that we have to admit in order to make the analysis of concepts work. So one does not need to believe in all objects of the type 1 to 8, nor in mental representations of objects in order to practice conceptual analysis and reconstruction. It is namely sufficient to accept very neutral idioms, such as definitions, individual objects, and linguistic expressions. And for instance, even such race as Tadeusz Kotarbiński believed that such things exist, like definitions, individual objects, and linguistic expressions. In such a situation, concepts may be then identified with what is given in definitions, and definitions are the results of the analysis of concepts. And conceptual analysis can be practiced by philosophers who hold very different views regarding the status of concepts. And this is exactly what was happening in the Lvov-Warsaw School. They had many different conceptions, but they did the same job. One more distinction is important here, and this is what I would like you to remember. Namely, if we have something like the concept of, for instance, clock, or as in this slide, concept of human being, please remember that we will call expressions human being, so parts of language, as carriers of the concept of a human being, and we will call instantiations of the concept of human being real people, okay, who exemplify in reality these concepts. And these carriers and instantiations of concepts are empirically accessible objects, okay? Concepts perhaps are not, but human beings, real human beings, and expressions like human being are empirically accessible. There is no problem with them. So they may constitute the empirical basis of the analysis. So it was the first hallmark, okay, this metaphysical neutrality. Now the second hallmark, reconstructive character. So the very idea that from the very beginning of the existence of the Lvov-Warsaw School, the dealing with concepts in the school was reconstructive, it was engineering, not simply analysis in some sense of this word. It is highly surprising that from the beginning of the school, analysis of concepts was always consciously connected with construction. In both Łukasiewicz and Brożek, the analysis contains, sometimes must contain, reconstructive elements, and the analysis of the concept is sometimes connected with its reconstruction. The first systematic presentation of the analytic procedure in the Lvov-Warsaw School was made by Łukasiewicz. It was written in 1906, but published in 1907. That's why these two dates appear here. In his analysis and construction of the concept of cause. English edition was published in 2022 of this paper. And what is very interesting in this paper of Łukasiewicz, it has two parts. The second part concerns the concept of cause, but the first part concerned the concept of analysis. In my opinion, Łukasiewicz was aware that his mentor, namely Twardowski, his colleagues involved, they all proceed with some analysis of concepts, but they don't codify it. They don't write how to do it. And he tried to do it, okay? Of course, in Łukasiewicz's sense, it was this paper was also written against psychologists, because Łukasiewicz was fed up with this dealing with presentations, okay, what is presented, the content, object of presentation. He didn't want it to in his philosophy. That's why his conception of concept is quite different from Twardowski's, but the procedure that he tried to reconstruct was, according to me, the very one used also by Twardowski. So, according to Łukasiewicz, concepts are abstract objects identified with the meanings of words, of terms, and also represented by a set of properties and also given in definitions. He wrote that to provide a logical analysis of concepts means to identify all its features and examine relations that obtain among them. So we will not go into these quotations, but because what is most interesting here is this a reconstructive element, okay? He wrote that in order to analyze a concept, the concept must already exist. However, sometimes there is no ready-made concept. So in such a case, the concept must be constructed. And Łukasiewicz wrote, it may happen that the concept presents itself somewhat differently than usual definitions of cause found in logic textbook or metaphysical works. It may even be the case that it does not fully correspond to what everyday speech, in a more or less unstable and imprecise way, calls a cause. If such a discrepancy arises, I will not be able to remedy it. One will simply have to become accustomed not to call cause something does not fall under the concept of cause. Just as one must become accustomed not to call carbonic acid a chemical compound with the formula CO2, which is not an acid, but an acid anhydride. So, as we may see, Łukasiewicz was convinced that after he reconstructs the concept of cause, people just should change what they are accustomed to, change their what their practice, okay, their linguistic practice, and they have to start to use these reconstructed concepts, and this procedures happens in all disciplines all the time, in physics and chemistry and so on. And it also is something standard for philosophical investigations. Why not? So as we see, the necessity of the reconstructive elements in philosophical analysis was already clear for him in 1906. One more interesting thing, Łukasiewicz distinguishes between ideal and real concepts. Real concepts are concepts which are somehow exemplified in reality, have spatio-temporal instances, where ideal concepts do not have them, and they are only such mathematical concepts. And he also analyzed the conditions that has to be imposed on the reconstructions of concepts. And he was convinced that internal consistency is something that has to be imposed on all reconstructed concepts. And for real concepts, there is also an additional requirement, namely consistency with reality. He wrote, real abstract and objects must moreover be in agreement with reality. If they are to be scientific concepts, they must therefore contain such features as we observe or at least infer in the corresponding concrete objects. Okay. So what does it mean to correspond to reality? Well, in fact, Łukasiewicz chooses few examples of typical causes, and he simply states that these few examples is something that he wants to describe by his definition, okay? So to catch with his definition. And it's very interesting if we look at how Tarski presents the philosophical idea of his analysis of the concept of truth, particularly in his later work, not in his 1933 work, but in his paper written more for philosophers from 1944, as I remember. In that paper, he presents these two conditions, internal consistency and consistency with some with some existing issues, like, yeah, this is what he used to say, and this existing issues, existing idea, existing intuition was Aristotelian idea of what is truthfulness. Okay, so that's very interesting, because Tarski for sure didn't know about Łukasiewicz paper, didn't know Łukasiewicz early writings, but he indicates the very identical criteria maybe not identical, but very, very similar criteria of correctness of the reconstruction of concept. Also, Tadeusz Czerzowski indicated this reconstructive character of the analysis of concepts. He reconstructed the method of conceptual analysis, which he defined as analytical description. And Czerzowski's approach was much more influenced by Twardowski and even Brentano. Czerzowski was one of the greatest Brentanists amongst Twardowski's students. He even used to say that the method of analytical description, this description, which makes concepts better, which improve concepts, it was introduced by Galileo in physics, and it was also introduced by Brentano in descriptive psychology, and it was used by Twardowski, and it was used by Twardowski students. And Czerzowski even states that in his paper on analytic description, he applies the method of description to analytical description itself, okay? So for Czerzowski, analytical description is an essential procedure for determining the meanings of terms and the fundamental principles of scientific disciplines, and also it plays a central role in philosophical investigations. Analytical description is applied to provide a conceptual framework for a given discipline. As such, analytical description naturally contains constructive elements. The results of analytical description is usually regulative with respect to pre-existing accounts of the analyzed concepts. And final results of analytic description is a definition, and it is usually a stipulative definition, which regulates the meaning of the word. Analysis in Czerzowski's sense begins with the selection of particular instantiation. So he focuses on these real objects, yes, which we analyze. The result of the analysis is intended to be adequate with respect to these instances. Not all, all the objects, not all what we call by a certain name, but only some few chosen examples, okay? At different stages of analytical description, different types of reasonings are employed. During data gathering stage, elements of inductive reasoning are used, and then deductive reasoning is applied. The same was emphasized by Łukasiewicz in his analysis and construction. These two types of reasoning that are used to provide concepts. These two scholars, Łukasiewicz and Czerzowski, they had different approaches to what concepts are, okay, but they agreed in, for instance, that reconstructive elements are something very important in these procedures of analysis, reconstruction of concepts, and also that what is the end point of the analysis is a definition, which is usually a stipulative, regulative definition. And let me add that far-reaching analogies may be found not only between Łukasiewicz and Czerzowski, but also between some other statements about definitions and how to provide a correct definition made, for instance, by Kotarbiński, Ajdukiewicz, or Kotarbińska, and even in methodological remarks of Alfred Tarski. So we see that there are many similarities in presenting what is reconstruction of concepts, even if there are some differences in answering to the question what concepts are. Now, categorical element of analysis is something also typical for the Lvov-Warsaw School. This categorical hallmark was indicated by Józef Bocheński, from who I started today. In his book, Between Logic and Fate, he enumerates three types of analysis: atomistic, in style of Russell, and Leibniz, linguistic, and categorical, which he describes as the Polish type of analysis. And he also describes himself as a representative of this type of analysis. Here is an example of categorical analysis from my book, What is Authority? It is extremely difficult to answer. We have to reach more and more abstract notions. Categories are on the top. And the question we ask ourselves is, what is authority? Is it quality, substance, relationship? In my opinion, it is best to say that it is a relationship. What kind of relationship? A three-part one. A three-part relationship contains 6 partial relationships. Are these relationships transitive or intransitive? Are the subject of authority a society or an individual? This is what is called analysis. Okay, so Bocheński emphasizes that in the course of analysis of a certain concept, it is very important to indicate what is ontological category of instantiation of this concept, what is authority. But in the when we look at various analyses provided in the Lvov-Warsaw School, it also very often happens that they did not ask what is the ontological category of the instantiation. Rather, they asked what is the semantic category of the carriers of these concepts. Because if we focus on language, we do not concentrate on ontological categories, but on semantical categories. And very, very often, they start to their investigations with stating what is the semantic category of the term, which meaning is reconstructed, whose meaning is reconstructed, okay? Okay. And now the corpus of analysis. This is the 4th hallmark of the analysis in the Lvov-Warsaw School. Namely, concepts are not real objects, only intentional. Analysis can be performed on them. But we have indirect access to them, indirect access to concepts. And what I mean here, a set of real objects, namely these instantiations, which an analysis of given concept is based, is here called the corpus of analysis. For example, clocks themselves or registered factual utterances about clocks can be the corpus of analysis of the concept of clock. We can state respectively that the corpus of analysis can be material, namely real clocks, or verbal utterances about clocks, or mixed when both types of sources are used. And in my opinion, as far as I know, through the analysis of these many examples, taking into account both the verbal and real corpus of analysis is one of the most important determinants of the analytical method in the Lvov-Warsaw School. Why taking both the sources is important? Well, using verbal sources, namely studying language, is something natural in philosophy after the linguistic turn. But basing philosophy on the real corpus protects philosophical analysis from heading in the clouds, and also from reducing the analysis and construction of concepts to the role of providing contributions to the dictionary. And as we know, such accusation of some kinds of analytic philosophy is sometimes formulated. Why it is important? When we perform an analysis based on material corpus, simply speaking, we reach concepts through objects, which are instantiations of these concepts. When analyzing the concept of clock, we can take into consideration some real clock, for instance, Big Ben from Westminster Palace Tower, or the clock in the Torun Town Hall Tower, or some imagined clock also. Yeah. The latter situation, considering imagined examples, is particularly characteristic to philosophers who include into imagined corpus both imagined object, idealized ones, as well as the object which are complicated through thought experiments. Okay, so thought experiments is a method of providing a kind of corpus to our analysis. And also, these thought experiments were used by members of the Warsaw School, and even in the 50s, I think, 1950s, Kotarbiński used this term to describe his dealing with concept. Let's experiment make some fantasy with this object. Okay, so it's something very natural in this kind of investigations. And now verbal corpus. If we assume that concepts are meaning of words and words are carriers of concepts, we can also reach concepts by analyzing the utterances in which their carriers occur. In this case, our corpus is verbal. A verbal corpus can consist, among others, of the existing definitions of expressions, the set of other utterances where our expression occurs in a meaningful way. These utterances may be taken from both natural situations and from scientific languages. We can take whatever we want from how we use the term. A verbal corpus may also contain imagined utterances, and now we very often use the term linguistic intuition. Okay, it's my intuition to use this word in such a way. Well, in my opinion, linguistic intuition is simply imagined, maybe understood as imagined utterances of some words in such contexts. When we examine our language intuitions concerning a certain expression, we just imagine the context in which we would use this expression or no, because we feel that something's wrong with that. Okay, now I move to another part, to some examples. I will do it really quickly because I talk already nearly an hour. So really very quickly, perhaps I will take just 3 examples and then I will move to description and stages of the analysis. In these examples, I will focus only on the correctness of the. I do not focus on correctness of the analysis. I only focus on methodological matters. I would like to show you that all the analysis provided within the Lvov-Warsaw School provided some corpus of analysis, some tools of analysis, and the final stage of analysis was a definition, was a kind of definition. So perhaps 3 examples, okay? For instance, Twardowski's concept of concept, 19.2. Twardowski assumes that presentations are superior category of concepts in psychological sense, and that visual presentations are contrasting elements with presentations. Twardowski relies on a modest material corpus. He bases his analysis on 2 examples of typical concepts. Moreover, at the stage of justifying the results of analysis, he also considers a specialist verbal corpus, that is the existing conceptions, such as Brentano's and his students' approaches to what concepts are. As a result of the analysis, Twardowski gives a classical definition of a concept, according to which concept is a presentation, consists of underlying presentation and presentation of judgments. What was Twardowski's analytical intuition with regard to the selected corpus? It was reporting definition, it was reporting. However, some of Twardowski's remarks reveal his awareness that his definition does not include all and only what is called a concept, okay? And thus, that he ultimately proposes a modifying definition, regulating definition. He regulates the way the term concept is used. The conceptual system that Twardowski fits into with his reconstruction is the conceptual scheme, conceptual system of descriptive psychology. It was similar with Witwicki's concept of ambition, so perhaps I will skip Witwicki. And then Łukasiewicz, his concept of cause. Łukasiewicz openly states that his reconstruction contains these creative elements. The construction of the concept of cause must accompany its analysis, since the concept of a cause that would correspond to the chosen material corpus and also non-contradictory does not exist at the moment of starting the analysis. Łukasiewicz material corpus consists of 2 instances of the concept. Very simple examples. So he also refers to material corpus, the flow of electric current as the cause of heating a platinum wire, and war of political disturbances as the cause of value drop of stocks. And moreover, Łukasiewicz takes into account some of the existing conception of cause, that is his specialized verbal corpus. And the key moment here is establishing the category of the instance of the concept of cause. According to Łukasiewicz, idea for this category, a cause is the first argument of the simple dependent relationship, and the argument of these relationships are a certain state of affairs. And as a result of his analysis and construction, we obtain a real distinctive definitions with an amplexive structure. A cause is a real object necessarily entailing another real object, but not being entailed by the way that is necessary. Let's skip Kotarbiński. Yeah, perhaps Tarkiewicz. Let me mention Tarkiewicz proposes an analysis of the concept of happiness, so the kind of ethical concept. And what is interesting in Tarkiewicz is that he takes very, very broad verbal corpus in his analysis. The author simply declares that he would like to include everything that was available to him, from the things written about happiness before him, from the antiquity to the 20th century. Naturally, Tarkiewicz takes into account only some specialist corpus in his approach, only, of course, a selection of colloquial statements. And based on both of these types of sources, Tarkiewicz states the ambiguity of the term happiness, distinguishes two common meanings of this expression and two philosophical meanings. Then he has these four concepts at his disposal, and only the fourth is stated by him as the object of interest. And for this very concept, he uses a definition. And ultimately, he decides on an idealizing or typological definition according to which happiness is full, durable, and justified satisfaction concerning the entire life. He also declares that he had to change his original reporting intentions into modifying ones, as it turned out to be easier to define ideal happiness than ordinary happiness. Yeah, these are very interesting examples, but very time-consuming. Like Ajdukiewicz, the concept of meaning, the concept of justice by Ajdukiewicz. So I will skip it, and perhaps only Bocheński. Okay. In the end, Bocheński naturally begins with categorial matters. Categorial matters were very important to him. He determines that authority is a free argument relationship. The first two arguments of this relationship are persons, and the third argument is a certain linguistic artifact, the domain of authority. The definition of authority is contextual and equivalent. P is the authority for S in field D, if and only if S accepts basically everything P provides for S, which belongs to the field domain D. Bocheński then determines the logical properties of the relationships of authority and describes its arguments in more detail. Reflection on the domain of authority leads him to distinguish between epistemic authority, where statements are the domain, and deontic authority, where directives are the domain. And this distinction becomes the basis for Bocheński's further theoretical constructions, which lead to many different areas of philosophy. Okay, so perhaps I have an idea to skip this. Okay, I think we still have enough time. So let me now present the stages of the analysis. So if you would like to follow the way concepts were analyzed in the Lvov-Warsaw School, if we would like to reconstruct such concepts, I would recommend to follow the following steps. So suppose we want to reconstruct the concept of a clock or a cause or happiness or justice. In the first stage, we have to indicate the indicators of the reconstruction. What does it mean? what are our expectations? What are our requirements of analysis? What are tools of our analysis? What is our conceptual framework? Firstly, reconstruction is determined by our goals. Okay, what we reconstruct this concept for? Only for theoretical reasons, or we have some practical applications for our concept? Do we find any ambiguities in using a certain term, or we are involved in a certain discussion and we notice that the certain term is used in various ways by various philosophers? So this our aims are very differentiated. So the aim may be simply cognitive, when we simply want to find out what is the reconstruction, what the reconstructed concepts consist of, or it may be connected with the need of eliminating conceptual chaos, philosophical pseudo-disputes, paradoxes, antinomies, and so on. Sometimes a concept needs to be adjusted to a new empirical data. For instance, if we analyze ethical or aesthetical concepts in face of civilizational challenges, let's look at the concept of beauty or the concept of death. Yeah? It has to be adjusted because just circumstances change all the time. Secondly, even analysis makes us, every analysis makes us use a certain tool. In case of reconstructive analysis of concepts, these tools are of course only conceptual. Okay, we do not manipulate with concepts with our arms. So these are only conceptual tools. In case of concept reconstruction within the Warsaw School, there are generally logical tools. What are these tools? The apparatus of set theory, elements of formal languages, semiotic distinctions, and so on. Some general assumptions of ontological, epistemological, methodological character are very often also needed. And they are also made consciously or unconsciously. It depends from the analysis. Thirdly, the concepts analyzed are usually not isolated islands in the world of concepts. Therefore, the reconstruction typically involves placing a given concept within a certain conceptual network. Okay, we want to indicate, involve a certain concept into a larger whole. Sometimes, of course, it happens that we have to reconstruct the whole conceptual scheme. So we are starting from the beginning and reconstruct the totality of the conceptual scheme of a given discipline. And in this stage, we also select our analytical corpus. So what is analytical corpus? As already said, the data set which the analysis is based on. So let's assume that we analyze concept P, or the meaning of expression P. The corpus of analysis may be material, then we take into account instances of concepts P, designates of name P. It may be real or imagined. The corpus of analysis can also be verbal and contain real or imagined contexts in which the carrier of concepts, namely the name P, occur. The corpus may be more or less specialized. What does it mean? That means it may be derived from colloquial language or scientific text. We may also rely on a mixed corpus that is using both instances and carriers of a concept. Mixed corpuses dominates in the analysis presented in my book. Now, material corpora are usually small and include one or several elements. In the constructive stage, the authors select a little number of typical instances of concepts. Why? Because it is easier to find what is essential if we have only a small number of elements. But also some thought experiments and experimentations can be used as well. And the choice of the corpus is basically a matter of choice of the author. But of course, it is obviously influences the course and the results of the analysis. In the stage 2, we process our data. it is a kind of the analysis in a broader sense. At this stage, there can be many difficulties, as both the instances of concepts and various material are in various material dependencies, and the carriers of the concepts are in semantic dependencies that are sometimes difficult to reveal. And it often turns out that the objects initially related to the use of the term P do not make up a uniform predicative set. So what can we do? There is a tendency in the Lvov-Warsaw School to minimize the corpus, and because it simply enables us to find what is the most important. Let's add that the question what the authors of the presented analysis ask themselves at this stage concerns the category of the object, what ontic category of are the instances of the concepts in, what semantic category are the carriers in. Establishing this category often put the analysis on the right track. Next stage of the analysis is formulating a hypothetical definition. It's a kind of hypothesis, okay? It's only for checking, okay, in whether it is good or no. This is a hypothesis on which of the properties of the concept instances indicated in the second stage from the concept P. In practice, it is usually about formulating a definition of this expression P. Depending on the results of this third stage, the reconstruction and only the analytical intentions, which can be diverse, this stage takes very different forms. Usually it is the case that the analytical hypothesis is regulative with respect to the existing descriptions of a given object. We usually expect only that this the result of our definition is somehow in accordance to our chosen corpus. It may also be the case that more than one pure concept emerges from a vague corpus, then appropriate distinctions are made and definitions are formulated that distinguish these different concepts from each other. Let us emphasize strongly that such conceptual regulations are natural for scientific language and they are also desirable in philosophy. And now it is also essential that we have a stage of testing the hypothesis, because you may reasonably ask, if we only choose few simple objects in our analysis, how it can be valuable to all the objects. And yes, you may see that in the process of testing the hypothesis, it often happens that we have to change our hypothesis into another if it does not. If it is not enough good according to our intentions. Okay. The question we ask here is whether the invented concept, constructed concept, actually includes the object that we would like to include it, and whether this concept fits well into the conceptual system in which we want to inscribe it in. Analytical hypothesis develops consequences that may apply to both objects and statements belonging to a general corpus of those not belonging to it. So the reconstructed concepts also juxtaposes with other elements of conceptual system. So at this stage, the range of the reconstructed definition is examined. For this reason, objects outside the selected corpus are taken into consideration. And here we often examine borderline cases, thought experiments, and so on. This stage is often carried out not by the author of the definitional hypothesis themselves, but rather from the outside by some critics. Let's look, for instance, as classical Gettier problem. Okay, this is exactly what Gettier problem looked like. He was a critic of classical definition of knowledge. Yeah, if the outcome of this stage is unsatisfactory, the previous steps must be repeated, sometimes even including the first step. So this procedure is similar to the process of creating scientific theories in hypothetical deductive model. If we want to look at it, I know that you are maybe already tired a little bit, so let's look at it from pictorial perspective. What is the algorithm of concept reconstruction? Well, we start with indicating the analytical corpus, and this is what is very important, because the corpus provides us with the empirical basis for the concept analysis. And there are two types of corpus, material and verbal. Material is a collection of selected instances of a concept. Verbal corpus consists of selecting statements in which the carriers of concept occur. These elements may be real or imaginary. Ultimately, we have the following possible elements: material real, so some real objects, okay, material imaginary through thought experiments, verbal real, and here we may select this corpus by many different ways. By experimental philosophy is one of them, okay? So I would say that experimental philosophy is a part of philosophy which provides a corpus for analysis. And we have also verbal imaginary, so-called linguistic intuitions. There are two different tendencies in analytic procedures, one to the maximization of our corpus, that, for instance, takes place in very often in linguistic investigations, and towards minimalization. And the second tendency is typical for the Lvov-Warsaw School. We also indicate other important factors such as analytical tools, conceptual scheme to which we want to include our concept, and the aim and correctness criteria of our reconstruction. Then we take all this data which we got from the corpus. We carry out processing of the corpus data. We try to find out these elements of the given concept. Then we present the elements of the concept under analysis in the form of a provisional hypothetical definition. And then what we do, then we test this definition. We check whether the definition meets the appropriate criteria. For example, whether it covers all and only the elements of the corpus, whether it has the proper formal properties, whether it fits in the conceptual framework, just as we planned it to fit. And the results of this testing may be twofold. If it does not satisfy us, our hypothetical definition, we have to unfortunately start from the beginning. We have to repeat our steps, sometimes all the steps, sometimes only some of them. But it happens very often that we even have to change the corpus of analysis. And this is very often what happens when we criticize a certain result of analysis. But if it happens that our definition fits to our expectations, it is correct, then we are happy to provide a correct definition of concepts, correct reconstruction of concepts, and this is what we meant to, and we are very happy because of that. Okay, and now coming to closing remarks. To conclude, in the Lvov-Warsaw School, a procedure of conceptual analysis or reconstruction was commonly employed despite certain differences can be described using a single scheme. Okay, this procedure was applied in the Lvov-Warsaw School from its very beginning and was already described in 1906 by Łukasiewicz. The most important features of this procedure are constructive elements, conditions of correctness, including consistency and adequacy with respect to the corpus, categorical moment, and integration into a specified conceptual framework. If we compare this procedure to what was happening in other philosophical centers, in the Lvov-Warsaw School, the intentions and results of the analysis were reconstructive, regulating in relation to existing state of conceptual confusion, reporting intentions pertained most of the selected corpus. And this reconstructive invasive character of the analysis in relation to the existing state of languages was not obvious to everyone. For instance, it was not obvious for English philosophers, and even they formulated something like the paradox of analysis, okay, because they were convinced that the result of analysis has to be an analytic sentence. That was never a case in the Warsaw School, because in the school the distinction between analytic and synthetic was not accepted. So in 1942, Langford formulated what he called the paradox of analysis, commenting on the concept of analysis by Moore. The assumption of his paradox was that the correct analysis is supposed to give a semantic equivalent of the analysandum. If the result of the analysis is to provide such an equivalent, then the analysis is trivial activity and its statements are obvious. If the analysis does not provide an equivalent, it is invalid. I think that I gave enough reasons to state that in the Lvov-Warsaw School, there were not such problems, such paradoxes, because it was all the time reconstruction, and not just providing some analytical statements that are already somehow inside this language or something like that. Yeah, of course, you may see that there are many analogies between the construction of concepts and what we call explication. But let me just emphasize that Carnap wrote his book in 1950, and he mentions Tarski analysis of the concept of truth as a typical example of explication. So we may say that it was Carnap who learned how to analyze, reconstruct concepts, how to provide explications from the Polish philosophers who he met several times, including 1930 in Warsaw. One more remark: the use of material corpus is particularly worth emphasizing. Indeed, philosophical analysis after the linguistic turn cannot ignore the role of language as a tool of describing the world, but philosopher cannot forget that in his thesis, similarly, the two concepts in scientific disciplines, they simply concern this world, real existing world, okay, not only linguistic objects. If a physicist looking for the concept of an atom may examine real atoms, and a biologist may examine real plant cells, then I think that philosopher looking for the concept of cause has a right to examine only also causal relations, real causal relations. And if he looks for a concept of justice, he has the right to look at justice itself, not only how the term justice is used by some people. And of course, there are these similarities between the reconstruction of concepts and conceptual engineering. There was a lot of research. Even my younger colleague Krzysztof Sankowski wrote an article, "Conceptual Engineering in the Lvov-Warsaw School." He is follows very much this new developments of conceptual engineering. And using also some bio results, he shows that these two procedures are very similar. Initially, conceptual engineers formulated their goals and methods rather generally, promoting their approach that in philosophy one should not only mean to analyze concepts, but construct them analogously to how engineers build bridges. And they were convinced that it is a significant innovation. Gradually, this studies of conceptual engineering evolved. They indicated objectives and tools of the analysis. Also, analogies between the procedures of conceptual engineering and other established methods, such as explication, was noted. However, we are, I think, still far away from a situation where someone wishing to undertake the construction of a certain concept has a ready-made instruction. I tried to propose a certain manual, but I'm not quite sure whether it is enough. Among the analysis and construction of concepts in the Lvov-Warsaw School, practiced in the first decades of the 20th century, there were many par excellence explications, and in this circle, conceptual engineering was practiced to a greater extent and with a greater methodological awareness than in other philosophical centers. I think that our research clearly shows that. And yeah, perhaps this last slide. What I think are the most important challenges of reconstruction of concepts. Firstly, let's notice that the concept reconstruction may seem like an unnecessary, unimportant, unattractive procedure, but in my opinion, it has a great significance, among other things, in eliminating verbal disputes. We should also remember that some concepts, which are socially significant, play an enormous role in our societies. It is enough to recall how much harm and sometimes good has been done in connection with concepts such as race, nation, gender, social justice, and so on. And what we have to remember that a philosopher who reconstructs a concept must be aware of the responsibility that rests on them and carefully examine the limits of their conceptual investigations and conceptual interventions into the existing conceptual schemes. That is a very sensitive matter, which I would like to address and which I would like to develop in the future. What are the limits of reconstruction? What are the limits of engineering? But I will leave you with that question. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you.
Very much, Anna, for your excellent talk. Now we have nearly no time for discussion, but Anna was kind enough to agree that we can enlarge our discussion. So if you have any comments or questions to Anna, please raise your hand, or if you are unable to find it, just show your face on screen, so we will see that you are interested, or you can also ask in the chat, but it will be better, I suppose. So I see Professor Bessler. So Professor Bessler, do you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. First of all, thank you very much for the lecture. It was very interesting for me. But all the time I thought when actually occurred the shift from the conceptual analysis to words or term analysis. It is amazing that reading, for example, Ajdukiewicz's Logika Pragmatyczna, we have there concepts, yes, when he discuss what is the difference between nominal definition and real definition. He referred to concepts and so on. But later, I'm not sure whether in Ajdukiewicz writings, but more generally, in the tradition of Lvov-Warsaw School, everything was about terms or words or names. So when the shift occurred?
In my opinion, there was no shift. It developed simultaneously, both approaches. But this double thinking about concepts and words, it begins already with Twardowski. If you look at his habilitation dissertation, he starts with this. There is this distinction between how we think of objects and that what is presented, so the content and object of presentation. And in the second or the third paragraph, he writes, it it is very similar to what we have in language. For instance, in Mill, we have terms, connotations, and denotations, okay? So he introduces this analogy between concepts and terms, and how we, you know, differentiate these two functions of terms, okay, of names, connotation and denotation. He introduces at the very beginning. And now Twardowski's ideas were developed in many different directions. For instance, psychological branch of the school developed this psychological direction. So for instance, Witwicki writes not the analysis of the word ambition, but the analysis of ambition, okay, the object of ambition. But Kotarbiński, who was a nominalist, followed this semantic path, okay, and for Kotarbiński, he was interested in terms and their definitions. But you know, the procedures were the same, because there was this equality or similarity, analogy, to not to go so far with identity and equality, between the structure of thinking and the functions of language. Okay, so it was the same. Of course, in Warsaw, there was more this semantic approach continued, while in people who were closer to Twardowski, they were more faithful to Brentano's and Twardowski's approach to descriptive psychology, but there was no switch. Okay, these two branches approaches were developed simultaneously. For instance, Słoniewska in the 50s writes psychological analysis of interest, psychological analysis. Okay, not the term interest, but what is interest. So there was, of course, we feel that move from speaking about presentations and judgments to speaking about terms, names, and sentences in something like the main core of philosophical investigations. But the majority of philosophers did not forget about this area of concepts in psychological sense, or at least what we can do with them. And you are absolutely right that Ajdukiewicz was one of them. He included also the scheme of descriptive psychology in his pragmatic logic. Okay. And also Tarski, who was a nominalist and very much involved in formal matters, but he writes pojęcie prawdy, okay? Not the term truth, pojęcie prawdy, the concept of truth. It is also significant, I think. Somehow this term pojęcie czegoś, concept of something, was an issue for philosophers from the school, from the very beginning to the last generations.
So thank you very much. I have never thought about it in this way. Yes, I still. So for me, it was obvious that it should be a moment, a particular time when they decided to do the language analysis instead of concept analysis. But it was much more complicated and much more, and as you said, different paths there was.
Yeah, I think those were developed but simultaneously developing paths. Of course, we know more about this semantic developments, a little bit less at the moment about this concept like. But you know, if we, for instance, look at this group of Twardowski students which were closer to Ingarden and phenomenology, what phenomenologists are doing is examining objects. okay, not linguistic facts, not linguistic objects, but they analyze objects. So and of course, phenomenology and Ingarden has the same source in Brentano as Twardowski. So this branch of Twardowski, which were closer to phenomenology and closer to Ingarden, did less semantic issues and more psychological, let's say. Yeah, we may call it differently, but you know what I mean.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for questions. And I would like to ask whether there are some other questions or comments. I don't see anything in good chat. So maybe I will have questions. Maybe as I'm more a historian than a philosopher, in fact, I have more historical questions. You mentioned that in some respect, philosophers from the Warsaw School were ahead from the philosophers, for instance, from Great Britain. And I'd like to ask you whether there were some connections between Vienna Circle, or you mentioned the Skarnap and Tarski connections, but if there are some other connections, or if, for instance, philosophers from the Warsaw School mentioned some philosophers from Great Britain or Vienna Circle in their conceptual analysis.
Oh, in conceptual analysis.
If there is more influenced by this Brentanian tradition.
I think that not exactly. When in the examples which I analyzed for my book, there were no such references. Well, sometimes there are mentioned. For instance, Ajdukiewicz, as far as I remember, mentions Moore's analysis of good in his analysis of happiness, but not as an inspiration, but however, rather as an example or something like that. Now I think that Russell, I recently studied the influences of Russell, but as far as I remember, in conceptual analysis, he was not followed. He was followed in some other areas, okay, but not in this sphere of philosophical investigations. Yeah, I would have to think about it. Perhaps in later approaches, some concepts, but you know, I'm trying to think what analysis or what reconstruction of concepts provided by Russell could be taken off by by members of the, well, yeah, in fact, yes, there is something. You know, Russell was not known in the Lvov-Warsaw School at the beginning because Russell was too young, of course, because Twardowski was older than Russell, 6 years older. But in 1903, one of Twardowski's students, Marian Borowski, prepared his doctoral dissertation about the concept of a whole, totality, pojęcie całości. And he found out that there is an article written in English, or perhaps it was published in Mind. It could be published in Mind. So the Mind was accessible in English, in Lvov. And it was written by Russell. And Borowski wanted to read this because it was about the problem of the whole, yeah, pojęcie całości, which he was interested in, and asked Łukasiewicz for help because he couldn't understand English. And Łukasiewicz helped Borowski to translate this article, and Łukasiewicz was just, you know, so much satisfied with the way Russell introduces mathematical concepts. But these were mathematical concepts, not strictly philosophical, yeah. But you know, there are some inspirations, okay, clear definitions, clear introducing. I don't know because I don't have. I never looked at this Borowski's work, whether he in fact used Russell's ideas. Perhaps yes. So it would be a nice kind of influence of early Russell, but for sure the kind of Russell's presentation of the concept of a whole provoked that Łukasiewicz then wanted to read Principles of Mathematics, not Principia, but Principles, that was published in 1903. And he, because he worked at the library, he asked the director of library to buy this book, and he could read the whole book of Russell, which was something extraordinary for him. And then he moved to mathematical logic because of this. Okay, it was one of the most important reasons. So yes, this influence could have taken place.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to ask the audience if there are any questions or comments. And if not, I would like to thank Anna again for her talk. And just to announce the next talk in our lecture series will be on 20th of April, at the same time as today's talk, and it will be given by Professor Grobler from University of Opole, and we will continue having lectures on Lvov-Warsaw School, because the title is Ajdukiewicz, Lakatos, and Racialization of Conventionalism. So if you are interested, you are welcome to join us next month. And I'm not sure whether Tadeusz would also like to announce the workshop, or whether I should do that. How do you feel about announcing it?
Well, actually, Sana, you are the chair, so you decide.
Okay, could you please announce, because I was talking so much today.
Sure. So I just want to say that we are having a workshop in philosophy of language in Visegrad countries in September, from the 14th to the 16th of September, and the call for papers is open now. And I'm going to share that with you. So just give me a second. I just find link and. So you should have a link in the chat box. So if you are interested to apply it, feel free to do that. And this is the third of the last workshop we have in the series. Yeah. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Tadeusz. And so this is all for us for today. And have a nice rest of the evening. And I hope that I will see each other in some other occasion. Goodbye.
Thank you. Sorry for the mistakes in my presentation.
Oh, it's okay. It's
I'm
okay.
so embarrassed, but I really didn't have time to, just look through it.
I try to.
Thank you so much.